Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, we are continuing with our weekly series of Shirim, the Torah of recovery and recovery on the Torah with the light revealed. We try and illuminate the human condition through the weekly Torah portion to give us a path to walk along as we struggle and grapple with and overcome and move through and beyond and grow from the human vicissitudes of day-to-day experience, in particular through the acute lens of recovery. And what Parshas Tazria brings us face to face with is a reality of what takes place already when we find ourselves settling down from the excitement of redemption from servitude, no longer necessarily remembering the servitude itself or the trauma of servitude, having gone through the Egel, receiving the Torah, all of the various stages, we've moved through Sefer, Bereshis, and Shemos, and we find ourselves in the day-to-day. We find ourselves in the ritual of the day-to-day and how we do things, and how we serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and how we refine ourselves, of how we get through each day with the most functional element of day-to-dayness. And that is going to be the process of Binyan HaMishkan and the Kalim of the Mishkan and the shape of the Mishkan and the dimensions and the measurements and the process of the korban and the purpose for the korban and the rectification of the korban. All of these are the secret story of each and every individual. As the Zohar HaKadosh points out, that the binyan, the tzura of the Mishkan is like the tzura of the Adam, which means to say that everything that's taking place on the macrocosmic level of the Mishkan itself, between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the tzaddikim and the korbanos and the kohanim, and all of those things which we don't fully understand other than by way of emuna, which is Lamala Mitam V'das, what we can uncover is the process of all of those stages as it is expressed in each and every one of our lives. In the story of Vayikra, it's the story of where young students begin learning Torah from, because the young student, in trying to begin the process of illuminating their lives through the insight of the Torah, is learning how to pick themselves up from the beginning stages. And the beginning stage of being a human being is living in a world of korban, living in a world of a desire for kirva, of a desire for closeness, of a desire for attachment, at the very same point, the paradoxical nature in which things need to be sometimes undone or destroyed in order for the sake that there to be connection, all of the picking up and taking down, picking up and taking down of the Mishkan itself, all of the not knowing and the knowing and the not knowing, all of these things animate what it means to be in the world of Vayikra, which is why the Aleph at the beginning of Vayikra is small, because at this point, the Alufal Shel Olam, the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is revealed so brilliantly in Sefer Bereshis and so powerfully, and in the post-traumatic growth orientation of Sefer Shemos, in Vayikra, the Alufal Shel Olam begins to be a little bit quieter, begins to be diminished, at least in accessibility, other than by Moshe Rabbeinu and the Kohanim. There begins to be a hierarchical framework in which there are those who know and there are those who don't know, and the politics of secrecy begin to pin a person down in some pigeon-held position of what they're able to access, what they don't have access to, and it keeps us stuck in our condition. That's the story of Vayikra. And one of the elements that we come in contact with in Vayikra is the very fabric of what reality is built upon, what human experience is built upon, is birth and death, life and death, the process of in and out, the process of experiencing life down here and the emergence upwards, the process of presence and absence, all of these different dynamics that take place within a person's mind in the most pleasant of ways, God willing, in the most pleasant of ways, that all of these dynamics should be experienced one way or the other. They'll be experienced, but we should begin to understand how to experiencing them through the light of Ni'imus B'Yamincha Netzach, to transform the mania, the prevention, the human condition of all of it, to transform that into the sweetness of Torah itself, which is the secret of Vayehi Noam, that sometimes the only prayer we can say to Hashem is, may this path be pleasant. We're on a path. To be on a path means I'm exhausted. That a derech implies that I'm already no longer operating in a place of mindful awareness or attention, because to be on the path is to have lost my mind a long time ago. That's Haiti Baderach, I was on a path. That's where Amalek attacks a person. That's also where Sipur Maisios begin, where the narrative starts. The derech is that in-between place, between the place that I've left prior to the place that I'm going to. The derech is mebalbel. But at the same point, the derech itself, the derech hachayim, the derech of what a yid is finding in the secret of Vayikra, of how to connect themselves to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is going to be, Hashem, I'm on a path. The path is difficult, but give me ni'imus. Vayihi noam. Let it be pleasant, because bechol derechecha te'ehu, and the das that a person needs to have, the das that a person needs to have ultimately in order to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is going to be B'chol Derechecha De'ehu, that I have to learn how to find HaKadosh Baruch Hu in each and every moment of my life, in each and every moment of the path, and we ask that HaKadosh Baruch Hu allow it to be pleasant. Hold on one second. One of the main places in which this grappling with the human condition really reveals itself most intensely in the Sefer of Vayikra is the sugyos of Tumah and Tahara. The sugyos of Tumah and Tahara, purity and impurity, which is a roughly translated word, but states of spirit, states of self, states of object relation, which color every aspect of our experience. That without looking at the halachic dimensions of Tumah and Tahara, of purity and impurity, which are complex in every aspect of their complexity, and they also represent the very same sugya that we're going to be discussing in its abstract sense. But writ large, the concept of Tum and Tara is the awareness that there is an ideal state in which I should be functioning, which is going to be a state of Tara, of refinement, of preparation, of being clean of any disturbances, of being clean of any dirtiness whatsoever, in whatever term I orient myself to those things, or free from any impurity or inability. That's a state of tahara. And a state of tumma is a place of being caught up and removed from the capacity to function within the normal state of things. I am deficient at this stage. There is something that has happened, and as a result of that thing which has happened, I now operate in a secondary position where I am no longer capable of operating in that ideal situation. Now, as Rabbi Nachman describes, Tumma and Tahara, ideal and non-ideal, perfection and imperfection, are not essential in their nature, but rather they emerge from the fact that Hashem wanted there to be a world of concealment, and within that world of concealment, now the next step is being aware that if there's going to be concealment, there's going to be an apparent splitness in which I can view myself. That one of the direct byproducts of a Kadosh Baruch Hu concealing himself is the emergence of something referred to as Tumma and Tahara, because these are possibilities, possible states of being. Prior to the emergence of creation, prior to the conscious awareness of being in this world, everything is fine, everything is unified, everything is what it is with awareness, without awareness. It's specifically the emergence into awareness, the emergence into sanity, the emergence into sobriety, the emergence into being a human being, which then once again brings me face to face in contact with the splitness at the heart of being human, which is Tumma and Tahara, ideal and non-ideal, able to perform in the way that I would like to perform, and operating with a hidden sense of inability. And when we look and reflect on our spiritual lives and our psychological lives and our personal lives, our interpersonal lives, a person can always come back to the fact that so much of our dysfunction, so much of the struggle, so much of the distortion emerges from the binary opposition which we lock ourselves in, wherein we view ourselves through a lens of all or nothing, black or white, Toma and Tahara. Something is good and something is bad. Something is pure and something is impure. And when incorrectly educated as to the nature of these models and what they're meant to do for the sake of the spiritual development of a conscious contact with HaKadosh Baruch Hu and a kiyum of Torah and mitzvos and the way that we're capable of doing it, these concepts seem to be limiting. They're self-limiting. There are times where I'm going to be in, and there are times where I'm going to be out. And then when we see our life not going the way that we want it to go, or we see others in our lives reacting to certain elements of our lives, which then highlight within us some of the hidden fears that we haven't even expressed to ourselves, as it happens regularly. And so if a person is now operating with the notion that there's being in and there's out, there's being tahor and good, and there's being tameh, which is no good, so then all of those circumstances are now going to create a sense of shame that takes me away from feeling value within myself. Because in the lens of all or nothing type thinking, either I'm all in or I'm all out. And now if I'm a little bit out as a result of this tumah, as a result of this theoretical impurity, so then I'm going to close the door completely on the other side and say, okay, I'm out, I'm fully out. And in that place, a person closes themselves off. A person closes themselves off from reality. We isolate and we refuse to bend even a little bit in terms of undoing the cognitive distortion of this all or nothing type thinking, because we've been conditioned like this. That Tumma and Tara, the categorizations of being in or being out, of having a rightful place within the spiritual process, or for whatever other reason, some blemish, whichever reason we can comprehend, what we would identify as Tumma, we feel that we're no longer in, that will take us out in a way that we never even would have arrived at, because in truth, a person is never out of the game. But because I feel that even the slightest stain, even the slightest feeling that something is not perfect, that completely disqualifies me from serving a Kadosh Baruch Hu in the right way, of being a good person in a good orientation, in a good enough way in this world. because I haven't learned that delicate nature of the balancing act between Tuma and Tahara, and that they both operate within a vacuum rather than representing two fundamentally separate screens of experience. So we close the door on our opportunities and we shut ourselves in these self-enclosed containments of my limitations, my shame, and all of my blemishes. And in truth, Tum and Tahara represent categories of self. They represent categories through which a person, A, must first and foremost relate to experience, relate to reality in the halachic framework of it. But on a psychological way, Tum and Tahara, as Rabbi Nachman explains in the 51st teaching of Likutei Moharan, is two ways of viewing the same thing. It's two ways of orienting one to the essential unity that exists at the heart of all things. And this was what Rabbi Akiva came to scream when he says, makom avnei shayesh tahor, when you arrive in that place of purified hewn stone, in the place of the aliyah into the pardes, into that lofty place of comprehending HaKadosh Baruch Hu's reaction to us and the way that we interact with HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the role that Hashem has in our lives and that we have in the realm of HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kavyachol. So Rabbi Akiva says, Al tomru mayim mayim, do not say water, water, ki davar sheker liyambud l'neged einav, because a person will never be able to actually stand up in the face of a lie. And what Rabbi Nachman describes is in that place where a person comes to contemplate Avnei Shayesh Tahor, the reality of Tahara and Tuma, the seemingly reality that they're two separate states of being wherein I'm either by Hashem or I'm far from Hashem. The most fundamental error that one can make is come to see them as two separate states of existence, as if they're shtei reshuyos, which is the problem that we see that Achar falls into in that story. That if there's shtei reshuyos, if there's two realms, then if I'm tahor, and then I'm with Hashem, and if I'm tameh, and I'm not with Hashem, God forbid, and I'm with the other side, some other avodah zarah of the mind. And in that place of the duplicitous nature of reality, it's very easy to come and tear them asunder and say it's black or white, it's this or that, it's tameh or tahor. And if I am tahor, I'm doing great. And if there's any element of tumah that even makes its way into the territory of my conception of self, then I already collapse completely. Because I've not yet learned to tolerate the secret of shalom, which is the secret that the two are expressive of a singular expression of one. Tum and Tara come with all of their prerequisite recommendations that if I find myself in a state of discomfort or being removed, then I need to contemplate why I'm in that state. I need to contemplate what it's saying to me. I need to contemplate how I can come back away from that and climb myself back out of the Tumah, back into the Tahara. But the Tumah is never there to say that I'm out of it, that I'm away from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It just means that my way of relating to HaKadosh Baruch Hu now in a state of Tumah will be through the lens of Tumah, which is a certain distance from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And a state of Tahara is a closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, a state of purity, a state of connectivity. But not, God forbid, that Tumah is a state of absolute removal from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because it's only through the reality of Tumah that we can come to possibly comprehend the nature of Tahor. That there's only one who has the capacity of unifying the secret of me, Yetze, me tahor tameh, and me tameh tahor, which is the secret of para aduma, which is the secret of the ultimate purification that rests at the heart of all things, even impurity, which is the secret of ben kachu ben kach nikrabanim. That no matter where a person finds themselves on the line of Tameh or the line of Tahor, it must be seen through the lens of the singular connection that we have to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And yes, the encounter with the limitations in our lives and being stuck in those places of Tumah, of the mind, of the heart, of the body, of those experiences which we have some element of control over to refine, we must refine. And then when we come in contact with the places that we don't have control over in the mind, where that irreducible stain of being human continues to persist in the possibility of absence, which is the source of all nature of Tumah, it's specifically in that place for me to find that I can live with the Tumah and the Tahara. That's how HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants me to live in this world. Why? Because it's all unified as one. I will do my very best to refine, but I will not be knocked off my game, and I will not be tricked into believing that the first sight of impurity to one degree or another, and may it always be as simple and as tamimistic as it possibly can, may it always be as fixable, may it always be as comfortable, may the problems never be big or heavy, and may they continue to be refined on each and every level. But to be human is to encounter the splitness between Tumah and Tahara. And the job of being human is to come to find that secret middle passage that unifies the two of them while maintaining their difference. The secret of nuance, the secret of the grayness, of the mitkala, of the balancing act that we must walk, tiptoeing the very fine line between yes or no, between up and down, between black or white, between all or nothing. And we have to learn to walk that gesher tsar ma'oid, two ma'ods, the ma'od of Tumah and the ma'od of Tahara. Because if it's only Tumah and Tahara, if it's only yes or no, and I'm in or I'm out, so then when I'm in, I'm fully in, and there's no stopping. And when I'm out, I'm fully out, and there's no growing. And that's the misapprehension of things in their extremity. That's the secret of the ma'od, to do something very much, very, very much, more and more intensely. Why? Because I'm operating from a place of scarcity. But the Gesher Tsar Ma'oid is the secret middle path that takes from the Ma'oid of the Tahara mindset of only being good, and it takes from the Ma'oid of the Tumma mindset of only being stuck in my negativity, and it builds a bridge out of both Ma'ods. It takes Ma'oid, Ma'oid. Ma'oid, Ma'oid, have Ruach. Ma'oid, Ma'oid is Adam. Ma'oid is Rosh Tevos Adam, because there's always a split element of the self. There's always the self that's above and the self that's below. There's always the recognition that I'm split between Tumma and Tahara. And ultimately, the job is to come to realize, but it's Echad, it's not Shtayim. And when I see that it's Echad, I can learn to grapple with the Tumma and the Tahara in a very different way. I can do it by way of refinement, by way of acceptance, not out of shame, not out of terror of being locked out, but rather out of the courage to move forward because I know that I'm always inside. And that any allowance that we give ourselves to delicately open up the closedness in which we view these concepts and the self-restricting and self-destroying kind of self-defeating practices of the mind to beat itself down over and over in all or nothing type thinking, in the klipa of sadness, in the klipa of yeyush, in the klipa of all of these different difficulties, we have to make room. We have to make room for the double nature of Parshas Vayikra, the fact that there is, of Sefer Vayikra, that there's a small aleph. This is where birth comes from. This is where emergence comes from. It's only by way of concealment that a person has the capacity to uncover a secret hidden light, which then reveals that concealment was always part and parcel of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light. But if we know it even before that revelation, then even when we find ourselves in the darkening places of that tumma of the mind, where I feel so far from the ideal, nevertheless, I'll understand the secret of Gam ki elach b'geit salmaves lo irara ki ati madi, that even though I walk in the valley in the shadow of death, which is the place of Yeush, which is the place of tumma, I shall fear no evil, for you're with me, because you're with me over here as well, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, bein b'tumma, bein b'tahara. That bein kach hu bein kach nikrabanim, gesher tsar ma'oid ma'oid. And there's a prerequisite when I encounter that tumma place in my mind, that impurity, that need to move myself upwards again, to refine myself, to align myself towards that refined ideal that I would like to live in accordance to. And there's something in my power that I can do. I'm a Babachira in this moment. And a person is always a Baal Bechira over something. There's always a Nikuda of Bechira, which when utilized properly will extend towards another Nikuda of Bechira, which will bring a person higher over and over. In spite of the fact that each territory of Bechira is a standalone entity, nevertheless, there is a unified reality between the two of them, or all of them, all the moments of Bechira, which operates within kind of the space of non-local engagement, as Quantum would describe. But each moment of Bechira opens up the pathway. And when I use my Bechira to move through the Tumma, I can also learn how to be okay with the fact that as a human being, I find myself susceptible to Tumma, and I need to learn how to grapple with that. And yes, the refinement, the process will still be one of solitude. There's one of solitude, but it's not isolation. It's not I am cut off because I am not worthy of being part of. It's not a cutting off because I'm so ashamed of myself that I must be cast aside. I must be thrown out like the trash so that I do not come and create impurity in some pure entity, God forbid, as it's so often taught to individuals. But rather, that's isolation and that's death bringing. But rather, the secret of solitude is when everybody waits for Miriam. Everybody waits for the person who has tzaras. Everybody waits because the solitude in response to the tumma is not because I'm meant to be ashamed and I'm meant to be removed and cast off like a scapegoat of sorts, which has no redemptive qualities and it's just sacrifice for the behalf of the klal. But rather, everything that's tameh that continues to believe in the tahara that burns from the core of it, there's a waiting that takes place. There's a solitude that exists within a belief of belongingness. It's a secret of badad yashav, that a person should sit alone. That's the place where hispaidudus takes place. But only because a person knows they can walk back into reality and meet the other with a sefer panim yafos can a person safely enter into that place of hispaidudus. Only when a person knows that there's a community waiting back, there's others waiting back for them after their encounter face to face with the Rabbeinu Shalom, who's also levado, then a person is not going to be able to abandon themselves towards that most important place of solitude because they're so terrified that it's going to look like isolation at the end of the day. And the way that we grapple with Tumma, instead of cutting it off from the functioning body of what we refer to as functionality, we have to relate to it from within the space of functionality in a way that reveals to it that it's also part of functionality. It might not yet be functioning in the way that it would like to be functioning, but it's part of functioning. It's not dysfunctional. It's part and parcel of the process. And that through that process of Badad Yashav, the tzaddikim point out that Badad is Rosh Tevos B'chol Derechecha De'ehu. that I will come to know HaKadosh Baruch Hu along all of my paths, the paths of Tumah, the paths of Tara, the paths of up, the paths of down, the paths of clarity and concealment. All of them become part and parcel of the expression and my unity with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it's only by willing myself to open my mind to the fact that Tumah and Tara both serve at the purpose of revealing HaKadosh Baruch Hu's unity in this world, that all of my experiences, all of the hither sides of my experiences, all of the concealment, all of the tzara'as on the house, all of the struggle and the clothes and the blemishes and all of the concealment that surrounds me will be revealed to have matmoinim, as the Piasetzner Rebbe Hashem Yom Domer points out, that when the house had tzara'as, we would come and break down the walls as we needed to show that there must be destruction of this element of Tumah, but what we would come to find is the treasures that were buried by the previous nations of the world that hid them there. And so there's a secret of matmoinim, of uncovering the gems of the struggle, of uncovering the Tumah that gives birth to a tahara that's mavik from it. As the Heilige story goes about the Chayzim Lublin, and Rav Tzadok tells it over as well, that there was a Bal Moifes, there was a tzaddik who had the ability of looking at any barrel of wine, looking at any entity, and he was able to say whether there was tumah or there was tahara, whether it was kosher or whether it was usher, whether it was allowed or whether it was disallowed. And somebody brought a barrel in front of him, and he was always right. Somebody brought a barrel in front of him of what they thought was wine, but in truth it was honey mead. It was a non-alcoholic beverage. It was something that had no quality of tuma or tahara. It wasn't impure and it wasn't pure. It was benign. And this tzaddik, trying to contemplate the presence of kedusha or the opposite, couldn't latch on. There was nothing there. There was no lachluchias. There was no graspability of clarifying the reality based on his Ruach HaKodesh. And only afterwards was it revealed to him that there was a mistake. It wasn't actually wine. There was no susceptibility to positive charge or a negative charge. It was simply a benign thing that was chargeless. And the tzaddik said, he says, for this reason, I was unable to discern whether it was kosher or not, because it's only by way of the presence and the reality of the susceptibility to tumah that we have any possibility of tahara. That it's only from within the concealment that there's a light that emerges afterwards. And if we deny the concealment or we train ourselves because of the continued negative way that we've been taught about it, to see the concealment or the tumah as a stark opposition to what I truly want in my life, as opposed to viewing it as part and parcel of the path that I have to overcome in order to come closer to Hashem, then we're going to continue to be lost. But when a person is capable of uncovering the secret of the Tumah and the Tahara, the capacity of finding HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the light of Benkach u'Benkach, we come to encounter God in every aspect of ourselves. When we're Yachid, when we're Rabin, and it's from that place in the Shalom Hapnimi that comes out when a person accepts all of their parts, their chametz and their matzah. Their chametz and their matzah. As we go through the process of sifting for our chametz, coming to terms with our chametz, trying to cleanse ourselves of all chametz, ultimately coming to the place of bir chametz, where we burn it all away, then coming to the place of bittul chametz, we're realizing I can never burn it all away. I just have to pretend that I really want to burn it all away, and that's enough. And then we go through the process of refining our lives away from that difficulty, away from that thing, and then we come into the place where the inner work begins, which is Sfiras HaOmer, which will bring us to a place of Shvuas, where we can now partake of the chametz and the matzah together, the up and the down together, the ever-moving up and down fluidity of the waves of the sea that populate our minds, our hearts, our bodies at any moment, and to be zoichet to the Tahara Amiti, to the Mayim Chaim Hayotzim Yerushalayim, to the secret of the new light of Tahara that will come from Yerushalayim and the hidden passageways of the mind, the hidden passageways of Metzius, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Mamlich himself once again, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals the Ruach HaKodesh within each and every Jew, and how we always knew exactly where we were at, and we always knew intuitively what we needed to do when we open up our minds to being more positive and open to ourselves, Be'ezus Hashem.